episode. Welcome to another episode of the Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and today is February 8th, 2011, and this is episode 447. More about this program and the guests that have provided us with such fascinating conversations can be found on our website, www.exogenynetwork.com. The Dawn of Shades always tries to bring interesting people right to the audience to hear about both new and old ideas. We focus on the people, places, and ideas that don't always get to make the mainstream news, kinds of things that are frequently labeled as alternative or paranormal. Now, for the show tonight, if you would like to have a question asked, you can email me at giascott@exogenynetwork.com or send it through the virtual auditorium on Pal Talk by text. I do monitor the email during the program, so if you're listening outside of the virtual auditorium and would like to have a question answered, please go ahead and email it to me, and I'll ask a question for you. In the virtual auditorium, just put it into text, and I'll try and catch it as the screen scrolls. And if I don't catch it the first time, feel free to repeat it again. And for those of you who are listening in on a podcast, go ahead and email me with your questions and comments, too. I'll try and get them answered for you as well. Now, for those of you who like to feel connected, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter, so you can link to me there. There's also a Dawn of Shades fan page on Facebook, so you can look for that as well. Now, for the readers, campers, and foodies, check out the articles and blogs. You can find some material that just might interest you. Tonight, November Hanson is joining us. November is a longtime friend of mine, as well as a radio show host, a researcher, writer, mom, and more. November and I have delved into many topics in the past on this program, as well as in other forums. So it's always a pleasure to have a discussion with her on almost anything. Tonight we're going to be talking about topics such as food safety, Codex Alimentarius, the unrest in Egypt, the growing complaints in the United States, and many other current events. So we're going to start off with November telling us about her own website, as well as where to get her ebook on aliens and her radio show. So November, you're in the hot seat.
Oh, I'm on deck. Okay, everybody. Hello, I'm November Hanson. I'm the host of the radio program Voice of the People, which I will be retiring from on March 12th. I've been doing it for 4.5 years, have enjoyed it tremendously, but other life's projects have called me to duty. My website is voiceofthepeopleradio.com. Nothing fancy, just has my upcoming guests listed. I do have a book out called, what did I call it? The Mosaic Project. It's part one of a long-running project. That is on ICAR1.com website, which is International Community for Abduction Research. Yeah, let's see if I know the name of the organization I do stuff for. I have 2 open projects. Huh?
I thought it was alien research.
Okay, so the producer's out there somewhere. He can correct one of us.
You won.
We won!
Well, we won.
We won! Oh, retirement party, maybe. Anyways, I've also got 2 open projects. One I'm doing is a personality trait project that is also on icar1.com for anybody that wants to participate. I'm basically collecting people's personality traits, see how it relates to abductions or sightings or somebody who's just interested in the subject. It's absolutely fascinating. I've got, I believe, approximately 70 responses now, and there's a lot of trends showing up that are just really, well, it's interesting. So I started writing on that. I'm on page 6. And the other project I have open is people who've had experiences with a reptilian-type encounter. And much different than the gray, absolutely, completely, totally different than a gray encounter, and has been interesting too. I haven't started writing that. I'm still compiling data. Let's see, what else do I do? I do all kinds of things, do a lot of research, manage 3 acres, and I work a daytime job, and I have 2 grown adults that are, living at home like everybody else's adult children. I would say that pretty much wraps it up.
Yeah, well, when you get thinking about the many hats that a person can wear in the course of a day, and, you try to recap it in 30 to 60 seconds, you're like, oh, yeah, right. That's like using a peephole in a small tube to determine, the area you live in. I mean, it's just such a small percentage of who we are. To try and really capsulize it in a thumbnail sketch of your personality. So I do find that is always an interesting thing too, is thumbnail sketches of people. How about you?
Oh, yes. What did you just ask me? You were talking about wearing all kinds of hats. I think my hat was on the...
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that anytime you do a thumbnail sketch or, a short biography, single-page type of biography, it's such a limited view of who a person is. I mean, it's really kind of almost unfair to both sides.
Oh, no, I agree. Absolutely. I do a lot of different things. I mean, that was just sort of summing it up. I'm also working on a sighting that's kind of interesting that took place in 1967 in the Andes. Allegedly, the sighting has actual proof that's been tested by a Russian agency, NASA, and the Smithsonian. So, and the person who sent me the request for looking into it said that they are actually holding the specific proof along with the documentation. So I'm kind of working on that too.
It'd be interesting to see if you get it. In the past, I've had a number of people promise me documentation that never materialized. So it's always disappointing. I mean, you get really excited and you think, oh, I'm going to get something that really has some value. And then, the letdown is the days work into weeks and the weeks into months, and still you don't get it until finally months become years and you forget all about it.
Well, I have no that, I don't know, really enthusiastic hope that this is it type of thing. It's just, I got a statement, it's worth checking out, and so I'm kind of pursuing that, along with everything else. So I keep busy.
Yeah, I think we all do kind of keep busy with our personal research as well as our programs. But you have an upcoming deadline. You said you were going to stop doing your radio program. We're going to have to twist your arm to get you to come back on the air with me at least.
You know what, Gia? I really don't see me just like totally being out of it and away from it. I would imagine when I finish some of the studies and I put them out onto the ICAR thing that I would do at least 1 or 2 programs concerning those studies. I have been asked by a couple of people if they needed, if I would guest host for them. I am perfectly, okay with doing that. It's just I have other things going on in my life that really are more important that have to do with family that I need to focus on. I like doing these projects. I tell you, people, when it comes to research, you read something that somebody's put out there, whether it's a book or an article, you have no idea, unless you've done it yourself, the incredible amount of time. If you want to do a good job, if you want to feel like that you did a thorough job, that it takes to do that. So for me, I enjoy doing it. I would much rather do that than watch television or I don't know, just other things that people might do to pass the time. But it does. I mean, I would say the first one I did, you could probably 100 hours easily, into that. And of course, that was over the course of 12 years, so it was probably much more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know the amount of research I've put in, and I haven't done any e-books, articles. I mean, I do blog entries, but they're sort of like a running commentary almost on whatever. It's been on many, many topics, actually, because I maintain 4 different blogs regularly. So each one has its own focus point, you might say. Although the Gia Scott one, obviously, is much more general because it's just whatever's on my mind. Which, did you see that bit from, it was in a MSNBC broadcast that contained the apparent image of a ghost horse and chariot or rider?
Okay, to be honest, like in the last 1 minute and 30 seconds, yes, I did look it up. I didn't actually watch the video. I found where somebody had put a picture up of the actual image. I found it very interesting, probably because it's next to another picture that is kind of an artist rendition to depict this pale rider of the apocalypse, and it is really interesting. But you know what? Also, too, when we have a flashpoint like that, like what's happening in Egypt, whether it was happening there or Israel, Palestine, or any of those places that are central to the idea of the second coming upon us type of thing, it seems like even if there wasn't something there, somebody would make something. It needs, there has to be something there. On the other hand, that is a pretty profound picture, and it really does bring to question in the mind, gosh, is it really possible? Is this the beginning?
Yeah, is that a ghost image, or is that some artifact caused by a flare of light? I'm not an expert. Yeah, I'm not an expert in that field, so I certainly I have no idea. Greg and I were sitting here watching it, both on the original clip as well as a smaller section that had been taken out. When I was shown the original clip on YouTube, I questioned whether or not it had been doctored. So we went looking for the original broadcast, which was available online. And yeah, it's in there in its entirety. Do I think that somebody photoshopped it in for the network? No, I don't think so. I don't think that at all. But I do. He claims that it's definitely a light flare that the camera caught, and it was reflected by moisture in the air. I agree that it's possible. I look at the image and I'm kind of like, I don't know. It doesn't always stay exactly in the same place in the frame, even though the camera's moving. I don't know. I'm sort of out in the limb on that. I haven't made up my mind if it is a ghostly image or simply, an anomaly of light. Certainly, Egypt has a long enough history to have plenty of ghosts. That's a
yeah. I think it would have been more fun if it was a mummy.
Yeah, but you think about it. Why would a ghost be a mummy? Because that wasn't done to the body until after they were dead. That'd be like coffins haunting us here.
Well, that's true.
That'd be kind of gruesome to have coffins bouncing around. Yeah. So, yeah, he saw the image of a primitive single horse archer's chariot. I saw what looked like a horse with a rider, but the rider was clear back by the tail, which also doesn't make sense. If you've ever ridden a horse, that's not a good place to ride.
No, I've ended up there before.
Yeah, I've been back there too, but it's usually a point of lots of leverage to send you forward very rapidly and vault you quite high. Yeah, not a good place to be.
Well, Georgia, I thought the pale horse was riderless.
I'd be a rider. I don't know about anybody else.
Well, I mean,
either a rider
in the
or
stories,
like
I thought the pale... Go ahead.
It could be a chariot. It could be a chariot. I think it's awful close, but I'm not real familiar with ancient Egyptian chariots, so I don't know how close they were to the rear end of the horse.
I have no idea either. It definitely is an interesting picture. It's worth taking a look at. As far as what's going on over there, I mean, I think you'd have to see something a little more widespread than just Egypt in order for somebody to really take a serious look, okay, so what's really happening here, and doing some research into ancient history, that type of thing.
I looked at a broadcast earlier today that was talking about the reasons for the uprising in Egypt, okay? it's more than being unhappy with your leader. Because, you know, we've seen us unhappy with our leader in the United States, and we don't have rioting like they've got. We've never had anything like that. We've seen other countries unhappy with their leaders, and they don't get that violent and whatnot. So it's more than just that. It's a case of many, many things that have brought the Egyptian people to the point that they're at now. They're saying that it is the result of the economic issues that they've got, as well as the high cost of food in proportion to income. Okay? And then they had some equation that figures out how wealth is distributed through the country. They had a name for it. I forgot it. But 0 is where everybody has exactly the same. And 100 is where only one person in the country has all the money. Okay? And Egypt came out like at 34 or something like that. And there were a number of other countries when they went on in their broadcasts that had numbers higher than Egypt that have also been suffering from riots and misfortune and whatnot. But the frightening thing was, okay, they gave this list of countries with higher numbers that have also had rioting and unrest and lots of political turmoil going on. Guess what country was substantially higher than all of those countries?
Oh, gosh. America?
Yes.
Now, I already knew it was.
And I was like, whoa, no wonder we're hearing things being said that I've never heard said in my lifetime, and that make me decidedly a bit uneasy about the future. So,
no, I agree. I've actually heard Americans talk about, it's only a matter of time. This is coming to us. Now, this is kind of hush behind closed doors, little voices in the grocery store, that type of thing. Nobody is surprised with what's happening over there. In Egypt, a year ago, they were talking about people being murdered over food. Humans have a basic survival pyramid. And at the very bottom of the pyramid is food, shelter, and clothing. You threaten the food, shelter, and clothing, and you are going to see things like riots. You might see things like looting and that type of stuff, because the 3 basic things you need to survive have been threatened, or you're without. That's not unusual at all, and it's happened all throughout history.
Yeah, and we're not just seeing it behind closed doors. I've actually seen it in very public forums where people, they're not threatening with starting a civil war, where they publicly will state, we are headed down the road towards a civil war. And the issue, a lot of people go, right, 2012, Y2K, Civil War. No. This boils down to the same issue that in reality caused the first Civil War that we had, which I hope remains the only one, which was states' rights. Everybody assumed it was slavery. No, it was really states' rights and economic issues. It wasn't so much about slavery, although that was a propaganda thing. But the whole thing is it boiled down to states' rights. And once again, what kind of issue are we seeing rearing its ugly head? States' rights.
Yeah.
And, there was dinkering going on for about 10 years before that Civil War broke out. Well, it's been in the last 6 months that I've heard this phrase being mentioned that I had, even through, because I grew up in the 60s with the civil rights riots and all that kind of stuff. I never heard those 2 words mentioned in regards to what was happening here. Never.
No, I haven't either, but I have heard it more and more lately. And what really probably gets me is who I'm hearing it from. It's not people that I would expect. It's not your usual, sandwich boards out there on the street saying, the sky's falling. This is just your everyday people looking at the world saying, you know what, there's something really strange going on here.
Yeah, and people are extremely dissatisfied with a number of issues. And, of course, we've always got our polar points of view that are usually the most vocal. We have the very fundamental conservatives that are against just about everything, and we have our very liberal sorts that are for just about everything. And guess what? The bulk of the people happen to be in the middle.
This is true.
Yeah, I tell people that politically I'm a conservative liberal, but next Tuesday I'll be a liberal conservative. Because I think there's strong points with both sides of the conservative versus liberal issue. But I don't see much difference between a Democrat and a Republican. I don't know if I'm alone in that, but when you really look at our two-party system, it's one party with two different names to do the same stuff. They just don't like each other. It's like Red Sox versus, what's another baseball team? Astros. It's the first one I can think of. I think it's a baseball team. But that's really what it's like. Change the uniform, it's doing the same thing. They're both playing baseball.
Gia, I've actually come to view the world a little bit differently, and I don't know why this has all come about in the last few months. As being within our own world, there's dimensions of existence in a way, in a third-dimensional reality. You have people that are, entrenched in and a part of the drug world. That's, to me, that would be like a whole foreign world, a whole other dimension. Couldn't even imagine. You look at the things going on in Mexico and on the border states, and it's like, to me, it's a whole other planet. Then you have your political world where, the politicians, the parties, rubbing noses with the world leaders. To me, that's just totally foreign. I just couldn't even imagine life being like that. And you have these different pockets of, the way, to me, most of the people of the world live in the normal dimension. Everybody else is someplace else. But that makes sense to me because it really is that foreign. I could never imagine going to some White House party, sitting down with dignitaries and even begin to dream what the heck they talk about.
Well, yeah. And maybe because of the fact that it's almost like these are different worlds, because like you and I talking last night, and I was talking about the fact that a number of years ago I had been a general manager for a motel. And in the course of business, I had some people who were apparently packaging drugs and whatnot, or trafficked them, or doing something with drugs that had stayed there. And a detective had come and asked me questions about certain guests I'd had, and I answered the questions, and this detective and I were alone in my office. There was no one else in the office. There was no physical way for anyone to overhear the conversation that was had. But within 30 minutes of the detective's departure, I had received a phone call advising me that it might not be healthy for me to give information like that away. And I happen to agree with him because, in my opinion, my information that I'd freely given after being asked for it was not going to do any good, and why was I putting myself at risk for something that was not going to do any good? People talk about doing the right thing. Sometimes the right thing may not be what you thought it was going to be. Because for me, the right thing was to no longer be proactive in supporting our laws because I had no support from law enforcement. I happened to be living in the state of Arizona at the time, where obviously foreign nationals and drug trafficking is much more of an issue than it is when I live in Louisiana, I live in Mississippi now. So it's, it's a different world, literally. It's a different world. You don't have that same kind of issue. And I'm sure in the ports, there may be stuff going on that I don't know about. But I don't work in the port. I don't know if we have drugs coming in with frozen chicken or something like that. I mean, that's an unknown to me. I don't want to know, But, it makes me realize that, you better listen to both sides of the story, because a lot of people would say, oh, you're wrong, you should have pushed it. No, I was a single parent with 2 kids, and the threats were quite clear. And the only way that those threats could have been given to me is if that particular detective had divulged what he'd been told.
Yeah. Well, I see the situation in Mexico becoming a huge problem in the future. Are we actually here, Georgia?
Yes, we are back on the air, folks. We're back after a brief technical break, you might say. Anyhow, cross your fingers that the ether powers that be are not going to throw any more gremlins into the production studios system. So where were we? I was in, folks, when we ended up disconnected, nobody realized for a few seconds that there was no longer any connection. So November was continuing her rant, and I was continuing my rant, and nobody heard either one of us. So hopefully we got it out of our system there. But where exactly were we, November?
I don't know, but when Joe brought us back, I got a nice snap, crackle, pop going on that wasn't there before. Oh, well, that's okay. Life goes on. Let's see. We were somewhere between Arizona, California, state budgets, drug cartels.
Oh, yeah. The whole issue with Mexico. Mexico, we have the AFTA superhighway that people have been talking about bringing in. Do we really want to build that while Mexico is still trying to get this drug issue and these organized crime factions under control? I don't want it built while it's still going on, personally. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm thinking more about the Berlin Wall than I am about superhighway.
Congratulations, you won.
Well, somebody won again. I mean, yeah, Berlin Wall sounds good at this point.
It does. I mean, it's like, come on, at some point in time, I don't care if it was Egypt that was at our border and it was all coming over here. I don't care if it was Russia at our border and it was all coming. I don't care who it is. It doesn't make any difference to me. It's like, it's destabilizing our own country. I don't know. I just see it not being good for our future. I really do.
No, and, I don't know if what we need to do is offer assistance to Mexico with soldiers to go in and help them clean house, or we need to send the FBI or the CIA or the NBC or CBS or some other alphabet soup organization down there, if they want the help. Do I think we should, say, okay, you're not getting it under control, we're going to come in here and clean house for you? No, I don't think we should do that. They are our neighbors. We should be nice to our neighbors. But the thing is that it's obviously not going well for them. And, if they need more warm bodies, right now they're pointing fingers that most of the weapons being used are coming from the United States. Okay, that creates a whole nother ball of wax. Because do I want to see our right to bear arms hindered any further? No, I don't. I don't think that that is the answer for us. And, I think about it because at one point I had an aunt and uncle that lived on a ranch that literally bordered Mexico. And I spent time staying with them. And I was told, even though this was far from any town or anything else, I was specifically told, do not wander away from the house because of the illegal aliens. And you don't want to get caught out there. And this was nearly about 30 years ago. And it's only gotten worse because the problems with crime that have bled over into the United States include things like home invasions, homicides, thefts and robberies and burglaries, breaking and entering into all sorts of buildings, stealing vehicles, kidnappings, all these things that we don't see on that kind of scale committed by a foreign national normally. And the border states really are seeing an increased amount of that. And even in Louisiana, I remember the community I lived in was pretty much a normal American community. We didn't have a lot of crime, high crime rate right in the area there. And there was a murder committed of a woman in one of the city parks. And everybody was like, whoa, because, the park closed at night, it was fenced, they had a jogging path. It's a beautiful, beautiful park. And, is it not safe to be there in the evening? Because there's always lots of people around. And her body was found several blocks away along the canal. And that murder was committed by a Mexican national. Why? I don't know what the motive was. I never, heard that much about it. I did hear that eventually he was arrested somewhere. But they've been looking for him for quite some time before he was caught. And, that increases the animosity towards foreign nationals, especially the illegal ones, because, once again, he was an illegal foreign national. So, I can understand why Arizona created those laws. They're not, the people in Arizona genuinely feel that the federal government has let them down as far as enforcing current immigration laws.
Right. Well, see, I have this whole thing about laws. I don't care where the laws are, whether it's in a school, in a community, in the nation. If you're going to make a law, enforce it. If you're not going to enforce it, don't make the law. I mean, it sends out such mixed messages, and especially the young people growing up today, they have no qualms whatsoever bending rules and just kind of doing whatever they please type of thing because they see this whole nation, it has laws, but a lot of them aren't even enforced. So all it does is just breed this, well, I don't have to do this because it doesn't matter, it's a law, nobody else follows it, why should I? So for me, it's either you make the law and enforce it, or you don't make the law. It just sends out the wrong message.
Yeah, I think I was involved for a number of years in animal rescue efforts, and I would see a lot of the activists pushing for laws, and I would just shake my head. And I remember one was they wanted a law made where dogs and cats had to be given a clean food and water dish every day. I'm like, for crying out loud, you're trying to get them just to give them food and water. Who cares if it's in a hubcap? You can't enforce the laws you've got. Why are you making it even more difficult for people to be law-abiding? I mean, it was ridiculous. They were concerned about the animals having food and water to begin with. Now they want to make sure that somebody carries them a fresh dish every day. And the thing is why get so nitpicky and overbearing If you can't enforce the current ones, why make it worse?
Well, no, I agree. There's laws out there that are absolutely ridiculous. Well, why create a law that there's no hope of ever enforcing? I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, there has to be consequences. If you don't follow rules or laws, there has to be a consequence. If you can't issue a consequence, then it's just totally worthless making the law or the rule.
Well, and another thing that people run into, and, I encountered a lot of accounts of this, so it particularly applies in terms of ordinances involving keeping small livestock and gardening and your self-sufficiency sort of issues. Okay, and what you get is conflicting ordinances. So you go to a government agency and you say, I want to know what the ordinances are about me keeping 6 chickens in my backyard. They tell you what the rules are, and you go home and you dutifully follow the rules and invest a substantial amount of money in your effort to be a law-abiding homeowner. Then 6 months or a year down the road, here comes Billy Nosy, and they say, oh, no, we have another set of rules that was created by this agency that affects you also, and you're not following those, so we're going to fine you. And, I'm like, no, that sort of, it's like the IRS taxing you and on your income tax, federal income tax, but there's a secret tax that if, you didn't fill out the form with a blue pen, then the other color ink law will apply to you. But we're not going to tell you about that law. No. We have a lot of agencies that duplicate efforts that make it difficult for people to be law-abiding, not just on keeping chickens, but everything from establishing a business to how you develop your property to how your kids go to school even. And, by making it so complicated where you have to run around find out who could possibly have a law that affects what you want to do. But you've got to contact 27 agencies to do one small thing. And it doesn't matter if it's, have a soup kitchen on Tuesdays or keep chickens or have a daycare in your backyard or whatever. It really does get, we've put ourselves in a situation where we have so many laws, so many agencies, that it's impossible for anyone to ever be fully informed.
Well, what's wrong with keeping things simple? Do you know there's like 6 or 7 ways that you can murder somebody and be charged with it? If you kill somebody, isn't it just murder? Well, it could be premeditated. It could be this. It could be. Who cares? Murder's murder, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Just have one slice fits all. If you use a knife, then that's worth what? 25 years. And if you use a gun, it's probably 30. It just gets so ridiculous. We make everything so blooming complicated. And it's just, we have illegals in American prisons. Take them out and send them back home. Why do we got to keep paying for them?
Well, they don't want that to happen because it isn't nice in a Mexican prison, I guess. Because I did work for the Arizona Department of Corrections in the past as a correctional officer, and a substantial portion of the inmates were Mexican nationals, and often didn't speak much English, so communication with them could get a little complicated because I don't speak any Spanish. I understand a little bit, but I don't speak it. And so it would get kind of a pain in the rear to try and communicate an idea across, especially the complex ones, and they didn't know how to do something, and you'd try to tell them, well, you need to go see this person at this place, and you can do that at such and such a time, and it would create a problem because of the communication barrier. I don't remember ever encountering a foreign national from a different country other than Mexico. So I can't say that it was any other language other than Spanish that I had an issue with. So, yeah, you know, I hate to keep pointing the finger at Mexico, but that seems...
I hear you.
Andrew, are you still there?
I can hear you now, Georgia. I lost you for a couple seconds.
Okay. Well, hopefully the audience can still hear us.
Yeah, I'm getting a message they can. I have no idea what that's about. And I don't like to keep picking on Mexico either. I mean, it's just, but you know, it really isn't just them, Georgia. I mean, I was always taught, you know, take care of home first, and then if you got things left over, you take care of others too. You know, I go to work, I pay taxes, and I'm taking care of just about every blooming country out there in the world. And it's not that I even mind so much, but when my own can't be taken care of because I got to pay for, you know, whoever it is clear over there, at what point in time are we going to ask the world to take responsibility? You know, it's like sometimes in some of the cases of the countries, they're so heavily dependent on us, when are the kids going to get to grow up? And that one, I don't know, that one kind of drives me nuts too. But on the other hand, I understand trying to help. But when we're helping them, are we helping them stay in a perpetual, you know, they have to depend on us in order for anything to happen? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is on that one is either. I don't know what the right answer is. But after a while, it's like, you know, 40% of my income already goes to taxes. Just how much more do I work hard. How much more do I got to contribute?
Right. I mean, the old rule of thumb was 25% of your income would go to taxes and retirement. Yeah, right. That's just not the case anymore. A larger percentage is going to taxes and Social Security and retirement and all that. Now, you know, in the virtual auditorium, it was just mentioned that if marijuana was legalized, it would help cut the funding to these drug cartels. And you know what? That definitely, I think, would do a great deal towards doing so. Just make it legal. I don't care if they got to register and get a card to buy it. They have to buy it in a special state store. I don't care how they do it. Just make it legally available and cut. I mean, we saw this happen with the, where it was, Prohibition. With Prohibition. That funded the organized crime groups in the United States. It provided their initial funding far in excess of, you know, their traditional things like gambling and prostitution and whatnot. All of a sudden they had the ability to sell alcohol to a wide variety of people, and that provided them with a huge income in proportion to what they'd had previously. Why not just make it legal, make them go to the marijuana store, whatever you want to call it, and buy it and tax it. And all of a sudden, these drug cartels will no longer have this huge source of income, because it's a fact of life. When you start reading, the use of marijuana goes all the way from the highest income to the lowest income, right across the board. You know, and a lot of people say, well, it has to be FDA approved. You know what? The FDA is not exactly my favorite alphabet soup of the week, because the FDA's approval rate versus failure rate is kind of depressing. You see all these drugs have to go through this long, involved approval process only to get recalled 5 years after they were put on the market because they're doing terrible things to people. And I think about it, one of the drugs that was recalled was a drug that had actually been prescribed to me. And I said, you know what, I'm not taking it. And I'm very glad I didn't take it because it was killing people.
Yeah, there's a lot of that seems to go on these days, too. And maybe it did in the past, and we just didn't hear about it that much. I mean, we have mass media, mass networking, that type of stuff, so things tend to get out a little bit more, a little bit quicker. The marijuana one, I don't know how I feel about it. I live in Oregon. You know, they put the medical marijuana bill on the ballot. I was all for it. I voted for it. Now I look and see what's happened. I'm not so sure I wouldn't vote it down if it went back onto the ballot. And really what happened is it was originally intended for people with chronic illnesses that lived with continuing pain, and it was a way to alleviate their pain. I think it's great. I thought it was wonderful. Now what's happened is that everybody and their neighbor that has a hangnail might have a little anxiety, suffers from some depression, has a tummy ache, whatever, they can get a medical marijuana card. So what we're seeing is these young people in their, mid-20s to early 30s having these medical marijuana parties. And, of course, it is them, and it's all just legal and stuff. But you know what they do? Nothing. They do absolute nothing. They don't work. They just hang out. So I didn't say there was anything wrong with it. I'm saying it's like with drinking. There has to be some responsibility. I mean, I don't want to provide, the world for people and all these extra little benefits because, well, they're too, stoned to go out and get a job. I have problems with that. And I'm sorry, there are a lot like that. Yes, alcohol is much worse. I agree. I'm just saying.
And I have to admit, if I have to choose between
there are two sides.
Who drank last night and someone who smoked a joint last night, I would rather work with a guy who smoked a joint last night because it's less likely to affect him today. Even though it would still show up in a drug test on his hair or whatever, it is less likely to affect his performance today than someone who used alcohol within the previous 24 hours.
Right, but you still got to get them off the couch or out of bed and to the job. And I wouldn't even bring it up if I'm not actually seeing it, and I am, and it's widespread. So, I mean...
But at the same time, we know there's a lot of people, it's neither marijuana nor alcohol, and they still don't get off the couch or the bed to go to work. So, it doesn't, it isn't just someone who's using alcohol or drugs that's unmotivated, because I do know a number of people who are just not motivated. But I think if we removed the illegal part from the equation, first of all, we would see certain people just stop using it because it's no longer fun because it's not illegal. And secondly, we can tax it, which provides an additional source of revenue. And thirdly, it no longer will fund drug cartels. So I have to say I'm pro-legalization, not just medical marijuana, but just making it legal. No matter what method they choose to make it legal. It's not something that I'm particularly interested in other than as a way of stopping funding these drug cartels.
Well, I would like to see that too. I mean, it is a problem.
We've had the
like
war on
prohibition
drugs for the last 30 years. We've had this long war on drugs. What good has it done? Nothing that I can tell. Now we have these incredibly violent drug cartels coming from Mexico, bleeding over into the United States, and it's way worse than it was 30 years ago. So if we had just legalized it 30 years ago instead of increasing the penalties and, doing this war on drugs, the war on drugs we lost, folks. Come on, let's come up with a new plan. And that's kind of the way I'm seeing it, is we lost that war. That tactic didn't work. We're not stopping it from coming across the border. Therefore, we need to come up with a different plan. And until somebody else comes up with something that sounds better than just legalizing it, but I'm looking at it in terms of what prohibition was.
I kind of go back a little bit further, and I'm not sure, Gia, I really don't. There was a time when all the stuff was legal. You could just go down to the local market and pick it up. Then something happened. Well, what happened? Why did we change that in history? There must have been some kind of reason. Why was it changed in history, until it got to the point to where you could no longer buy that at your local grocery store, drugstore, whatever. I only have an idea of what it was. So if we legalize it,
was a opiate drug that was used to treat colic in babies, I believe. It was available by going to any drugstore and buying it. Then they changed it where you had to sign for it because some mothers were drugging their kids because they were much easier to manage. There again, that's something that should be addressed under child abuse rather than, saying that, it was a case of paregoric was bad. No, it was how it was being used. It's no longer legal to go into the drugstore and even sign for paregoric. But just like if you want to go buy the over-the-counter, they used to be over-the-counter remedies for colds and flu. Well, then they discovered that they were being used to make some designer drug. And then they pulled it off the shelves. Now it's behind the pharmacist's counter. I don't know if you have to sign for it or whatever. One of them happened to be, the ingredients happened to be pseudoephedrine, which happened to be an ingredient that I had to read the label to make sure that I did not get because I happened to react very badly to it. And so for me, it just made it easier to go into the drugstore or discount store or wherever and buy a cold remedy because I know there's not going to be any pseudoephedrine stuff sitting here. And, because of the fact it was being misused to make something that was illegal, access was restricted. And I know recently there was some stuff in the newspaper here in the Mississippi, Alabama area because Mississippi made it more, one of the states made it more difficult to buy it. You could only buy so much and so often or some such thing. And tracking who bought the stuff. All right, is that concerning? Well, if you're really paranoid about Big Brother paying attention to everything you do, probably it was concerning. Otherwise, it was only going to concern you if you were using this stuff to make, I think it's crystal meth is what they call it, whichever drug it was. So if you were cooking this stuff up, then you would be worried about it. And they've also had this big concern about potpourris and what was the other one? Incense that was supposed to be synthetic marijuana. Well, I don't know anything about it, but they've had a big to-do and spent a lot of time arresting convenience store operators for selling the stuff out of their store. Is it important? I don't know. It's something that's been going on. Is it something I have any personal input about? I don't know anything about the stuff. The first I heard of it was when they were making it illegal and arresting all these people.
Gia, I really think that it's the case of, there's a lot of things in this country that really should be voted the will of the people and really should be states' rights. I live in a state where medical marijuana is legal. It was voted by the will of the people. The right to die is legal. It was by the will of the people. I think a lot of those subjects really is about democracy. It should really be the will of the people. If there's a group out there that wants to legalize, marijuana, fine. Put it to the test. Let it be the will of the people. I'm pretty democratic. I'm not no Republican.
Well, there again, okay.
That type of thing, but...
the whole thing with food safety. Food safety's been a big topic here lately. And we've had all these discussions about, they're going to make our food supply safe. Well, then you start looking at the actual bills they're proposing. And you realize, no, they're not going to make your food safe. They're just going to restrict who raises it and where you can buy it and which options you have, as well as probably the price. Is that a safe food supply? No. Was I happy to see these laws? No. I don't want the government telling me what I can and cannot eat or where I can buy it from. I'm not even though I personally don't like the taste of raw milk, I like my milk pasteurized and homogenized. I have drunk raw milk, and to me, it always has an off taste, and it dates from an experience as a kid. I stayed with a farm family often, and the milk that they used in their home was the milk that had been fouled, because all it takes, even in a 5-gallon can, is one single fleck of manure. And which, anybody who lives on a farm knows that single fleck of manure you probably eat 10 times or more in an hour and never notice. But it makes the milk taste bad. And that's the milk that they used in the house. So that, growing up, was my experience with raw milk. I hated to drink it. But raw milk is necessary. Like if I want to make cheese or certain other things, I need raw milk to make these other foods. Do I want the government telling me that it's illegal to go buy raw milk from my friend Tom, who has 6 goats and 4 cows and only sells the milk, to people he knows? No, but it is. If anybody finds out that my friend Joe is selling me raw milk, then he can be arrested, his livestock confiscated, and possibly he can even ultimately lose his property in addition to serving time in prison. Is that a reasonable repercussion? No, that's ridiculous. But that's the reality of the law. That just, is it fair? No. Now they're telling us that all these things are terrible for us, even though it's like 0.03% of the population in the United States is ever going to contract this disease from eating this food. And it affects everything from raw eggs, raw oysters, raw fruit and vegetable juice is also not legal to sell or buy. And, I'm like, come on, we're getting a little goofy. It is our job to be somewhat protective of ourselves. When you're buying a raw product, you know that there are certain inherent risks about consuming this raw product. It doesn't matter if it's fruit or vegetable, vegetable in origin or animal in origin. It doesn't make any difference. If you consume it, you should know what your risk factors are. If I want to eat raw oysters, I know that I could potentially become ill from eating them. But telling me that I don't have the right to eat raw oysters is kind of ridiculous. It just happens. I don't particularly care for them, but that's my preference. I don't want anybody telling me I can't eat them. And the whole thing is that oysters are a big deal here on the coast, so that's definitely one that has come to mind quite easily. To tell people that you cannot raise food in your backyard, you cannot have livestock on your property, and if we decide that it's not a good thing, we can come in and confiscate and kill these animals. Is that fair? I don't know.
I don't know either, Gia. The food safety thing that's been going around to me is just a gateway to get into, I think they want to manage calorie intake, to be honest. And I think they're just using that as a gateway to do that.
Yeah, and the whole thing is do we really need our government to act as our big brother, as our parent, actually, telling us what we can and can't do? I mean, I told my kids what they could and could not eat. No, you can't have ice cream for breakfast. You have to eat oatmeal. No, you cannot have ketchup as a beverage. Drink milk. That was what I did as a parent. No, you can't have a soda pop today. You had one yesterday. No, you can't have fast food for you. This is the stuff that I did as a parent. I'm going to be 50 this year. I don't need a daddy right now telling me what I should or should not eat. I already know this. Coming along and slapping my hand is not going to make me a very happy camper.
So why all of a sudden this whole food safety thing? I mean,
It is
I can understand it from the standpoint of making sure that factories are staying clean. I mean, there was a time period in our history where they used to do weird things with food, like bleach bad meat to take the smell away and sell it, as if it was something good for you. I mean, there was a dark time in the industry where those types of practices.
Those dark times have not ended, November. Did you know, I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago. There's a particular company, I don't remember the company's name, but anyhow, they supply most of the fast food hamburgers in the United States, as well as a large amount of the hamburger that is sold in grocery stores. And they take the meat and it's ground up into what we know as hamburger, and it's treated with ammonia to kill bovine-borne illnesses, and then sold to you. And it does not have to be labeled that it was, in fact, treated with ammonia, something you use to clean your toilet, for crying out loud. I mean, yuck.
I can't stand the
Would
smell
you
of it.
drink ammonia? And yet they're treating this hamburger with ammonia, and it's safe, and it's legal, and it's FDA approved, and they don't have to label it. And I have to admit, my hamburger consumption has dropped dramatically. Even Greg, who is a big fan of the ketchup-less cheeseburger, has reduced his cheeseburger consumption dramatically after finding that out. That's gruesome. And a lot of people say, well, go buy organic. Well, yeah, it's a great idea, but first of all, we live on a very tight budget. And secondly, I have not found a health food store that sells groceries on the Gulf Coast yet. So, in the area I live, from Mobile to Biloxi, I've not found any health food stores that sell grocery type and organic foods. So, the whole thing is not only is it's 2 or 3 times as expensive to buy organic products, but they're also much more difficult to find. Apparently, most people along the Gulf Coast are not particularly concerned about their food source. I love to buy from farmers markets. I love to buy from those trucks that are parked alongside the road. You get great prices. It's right from the farmer. It's great. I think it's a great old fisherman, because I bought shrimp that way too. The whole thing is those things would be illegal too. It's going to effectively create a black market for various food products.
Though, sometimes I wonder too, I'll go into the grocery store rarely. Thank goodness other people in my household like to do shopping. I don't. I will go in there, and they have this, you have your fresh vegetables, supposedly, and then you have the organically grown ones and the ones that are not. Of course, the organically grown ones are much more expensive, but sometimes you look at them and you're thinking, I really don't see the difference. And so then it's like, is this just propaganda? Is somebody billing something as being organically grown just so they can make a little more money? I don't know that doesn't happen. And, so it really is this consumer trust.
Right.
I mean,
right.
sometimes I don't know.
A lot of these corporations I don't really trust. I do know that for a farmer to get organically certified takes over 10 years. That's a long haul, because a number of the blueberry farms, they'll tell you, we're not organically certified, but we practice organic methods. I have to believe them. It's much more believable when you see the farmer pick the fruit from the tree and it goes straight in his mouth, that it is, in fact, organically grown. But do I know for a fact? No. There has to be an element of trust. But, when you're standing on the farm, you can assess things far more accurately than when you're standing in the grocery store looking at identical boxes of blueberries and saying, well, this one's $4 and this one's $2. Which one do I want? Well, I want the one that's not wrinkled or moldy. Thank you very much. And both of those can be difficult to do at the store. Because we do have trouble getting, food that is actually fresh which is why I love the farmers markets and buying from the farms and so forth and so on.
Right. We do have some of that around here, but then again, you're just getting whatever happens to be in season generally, and Oregon doesn't have a very long growing season.
No, I grew up with the short growing seasons, and that's why I also know how to can and freeze and dry and so forth and so on, so that I have things from previous seasons that are available to me. But it is a lot of work. And does everybody have the amount of time to do the work? No. I know there are many times I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to make a couple of batches of jelly before I went to work. Right? Not everybody's that dedicated or crazy.
Instant has a point.
A part of it is, too, we have trouble ascertaining the source of our fruits and vegetables, the fresh ones especially. Canned things are clearly labeled with the country of origin, but the fresh ones, it's much more difficult to figure out where they came from. In addition, in the United States, they do not have to label genetically modified organisms as being such. So you can be buying cloned beef or drinking milk from hormone, well, I don't know if that's genetically, but hormone milk. You don't have to label that. You don't have to label the genetically modified fruits and vegetables, and so forth and so on. What has this done to change the way I am looking at things? I'm actually looking for garden space. I have found some, not probably enough, but I found some local garden space for me to just sort of do a renting or sharecropping agreement with the owners, so that I can actually raise some of our fruits and vegetables or some of our garden products. Just because I just got tired of the grocery store. Because in effect, the corporations are controlling what we buy, because they only stock such products on their shelves. Like, okay, a common product in the United States when I was a kid was a cooked cereal called Malt-O-Meal. It was available in original and quick, as well as a chocolate variety. This was a staple. Well, for the last 7 years, I had not been able to find it. I finally found it when I was visiting my daughter last weekend. We each bought a box, because this has been very hard to find. And it's just farina with malted barley in it. It tastes slightly different than regular farina. But this is something that she grew up eating. I grew up eating. My parents probably ate it too. And we couldn't find it. It's apparently not real popular in Louisiana and Mississippi. We bought a box each. And products are only on the shelves. I'm told that some of these companies actually have to pay the grocery store to allot them shelf space. That's kind of a strange concept to think that these corporations are auctioning off our ability to purchase.
Well, I agree with that too. That is pretty bizarre. Well, everything's becoming so. You have the big Walmart superstores. You see less grocery stores. They're combining. Before you could have these little mom and pop grocery stores. In the community that I lived in, there was 3. Now we're down to 1 superstore type of thing, a Safeway. There's another one that's trying to stay in business, but it's also very expensive because it is a mom and pop type store. And then, of course, we have Walmart. I think Walmart's just about every place. They might even have a store on Mars by now. But
well, I have to admit, okay, I've never been a huge Walmart fan, okay, because so often I'd see them come into a small town. They ran out all the mom-and-pop local shops, and then they would quit carrying the products that had duplicated what the mom-and-pop shop had, which would just, then you couldn't get it anymore. You had to mail order it from some distant land and so forth and so on, and it was really, really frustrating for small-town people. Now, having access to goods was kind of nice, but it was also depressing when you discovered that pretty soon you didn't have access to the goods or the great price. But now I'm in a situation where the closest grocery store happens to be a Walmart, which means I do 99% of my shopping at Walmart. And I'm discovering that they don't carry a lot of the stuff I'm used to buying. You know, they just don't have it. Or it's much more expensive than what I'm used to paying for it. You know, it's a strange thing, you know, as far as grocery stores go. And am I real thrilled with it? No, not really. I've seen a dramatic change in the items that I'm willing to buy anymore. And it's because either it's not the same quality or the product, similar product that they offer is enough different that we no longer like it. But it's not the same, you know, and I shopped at chain grocery stores before because that was what I had nearby. Yeah, and so I'm, you know, I think I'm getting the Walmart shock treatment now, which probably most of the America has gone through already, and I had managed to successfully avoid. But now I'm getting it as far as the grocery store department goes. And it's like, oh, wow, you can't buy that here. Where do I have to go? You know, spices and stuff like that. I'm finding that more and more I am doing the mail order thing to get spices that I'm familiar with. Like aniseed. I didn't think aniseed was an exotic spice. Walmart thought so. So you do see some changes there as far as what I do. Now, is it... You know, well, there again, we saw that deal recently about if you see something strange, report it to Walmart. I mean, for Homeland Security, I was like, whoa, Walmart's getting a little too invasive in our lives if now we're supposed to be reporting Homeland Security issues to Walmart? That didn't make any sense. And are you still there, November?
I am. The virtual auditorium is a little distracting. The children are playing games, and instead of being a part of a serious conversation, I got carried away.
You got lost, huh?
You know, it's a funny story I got to tell you about Walmart, about Made in China, about somebody I know absolutely refuses to shop at Walmart because everything is made in China, and the children are making these products. So this person goes to Fred Meyer's. And like one day I finally said to the person, I said, do you realize if you go to Fred Meyer's, everything's made in China? They just charge more? She just, no, that can't be possible. Well, of course. So guess what? Everything in Fred Meyer's is made in China too. There is very few things made in the USA.
Stock, you know, on this Made in America thing, I actually did a blog entry recently about it. I went to Big Lots. Well, Big Lots is not known as your upper scale shopping destination, right? It's a closeout store. I was going in looking for some odd things. I wanted a glass bowl to cook pasta in the microwave with, and I wanted some pans to fit in a convection oven, and, you know, stuff like that, just oddball stuff. And so we go in there and we start looking around, and the Big Lots that we were in, the one close to us, is on the Big Lots scale. It's a fairly small store because Big Lots typically will use retail space that was abandoned by some other chain, and then they revamp it for their use. That's been my experience with how Big Lots comes into an area. So anyhow, we're shopping around, and I bought some baking pans, and I bought my glass bowl, and I bought a plastic container that has these clamped down lids, and, you know, some other odds and ends. But anyhow, we get to looking at everything I bought, and guess what? It was made in America. Every single item.
And where did you go? I don't think anything in my community is made in America. Well, except for the products that my... Huh?
Any talking glass products are made in America. I don't remember the name of the non-stick bakeware that I bought. That was made in Cleveland. The plastic product, I don't remember what, I'm thinking it was made in Chicago. So these were all made in America products. I didn't even know we had any factories left. I honestly didn't. Because it seemed like every time I read something, well, the last factory that made item X has closed and moved to Mexico or moved to Indonesia or moved to wherever. So I was in a state of shock. I mean, I felt like I'd hit the gold mine, you know. But unfortunately, I had to make up for my happy American experience, and I had to go to Walmart today and buy things that were probably all made in China. I didn't even look. I didn't want to know. I needed the items, and that was the only place to buy them. Like dog cable. Okay, there's no reason why we couldn't have made this braided cable with plastic wrap and clips on the end of it that was made in America, but it was probably shipped thousands of miles from someplace else. But it's disappointing when you can't buy American made, but when you have an experience and you suddenly discover that these products are made in America still. And I was actually thrilled to discover that Anchor Hocking still makes all of its products in the United States. Anchor Hocking is a glass company that has made glassware that I've grown up with. And, it's just familiar to me, from everything from glasses to bowls and whatever. And it's made in the United States.
Never heard of the place. It is kind of funny if you think about it. In the United States, there's, places that are really popular in different regions. Everybody knows what they are, but you go to some other region in the U.S., nobody's ever heard of it. Kind of interesting.
Well, I would just about bet that if you have a glass bowl in your cupboard and you go and look at it on the bottom, it'll say Anchor or Anchor Hocking. They don't always use the full name on the products themselves. But the least expensive brand, I mean, the two brands I can think of is Pyrex and Anchor Hocking. Anchor Hocking makes glasses, bowls, all sorts of stuff. Pyrex, of course, made heat-resistant glass. I don't know if it's still made in the United States or not.
See, I don't know either. I do have Pyrex, but...
Yeah, a lot of the glassware is, in fact, made by a company called Anchor or Anchor Hocking. And I know I have glasses in the cupboard and stuff that were made there. So it is kind of cool when you can find a product that is made in the United States. So I was pleased with that. I don't know if my purchase made any difference in the world economy, but I was just thrilled that I could manage to find, actually it was 4 different items I bought, all made in the United States. And better yet, it was not inferior quality products. That's the other thing that we hear so often. American-made products are inferior in quality. And I don't think that's necessarily true.
Well, I don't know who makes washers and dryers anymore, but those things are pretty much junk. We had a washer and dryer that we had for 25 years. And it just ran and ran and ran, and, finally it just really wore out. We've been through 2 now in the last 10 years, 2 sets. I mean, these are supposed to be your top-of-the-line, Maytags. They're junk. So I don't know who's making them, but it's not here anymore.
Well, that brings up another pet peeve of mine, which is customer service. Now, when I go into an American store and buy a product in the United States, with my American money, I would really like to be able to call customer service in the United States, too. Unfortunately, that's not likely to happen.
No, it's almost like if you go into an American store, it's a privilege for you to be able to shop in there. I've noticed that over the last 3 or 4 years. It's terrible. They don't teach these people customer service.
No, and when you call a customer service center, it's not just Americans. You deal with the same attitude if it's in any other country. I don't care, what kind of English skills they've got. Rude is still rude. And just my absolute pet peeve is Microsoft. The largest American corporation outsources customer service. All right, it's very difficult now to find a human being to call. Now they want you to usually email. And then when you send them the first email complaining about the problem, they respond with, send us a screenshot. Now, in my case, I was complaining about billing. What am I supposed to tell you? Send you a screenshot of my bank account? I don't have anything from you to tell me why you are billing me. You're sending these charges through, but I don't know why. I want to know why. And until you tell me why, I don't have a screenshot. No, I finally gave up after about 4 weeks of trying to get them to make sense. And their response is, when I did finally get a human being, it was a case of, well, we couldn't possibly make a mistake. Goodbye. Hang up on me. Apparently, if they have an unresolved case, it must go bad on their record. So they just resolve it by saying, we didn't make a mistake. Bye. And you have to start all over again, trying to get that human being up on you. Oh, yeah, that one really. It was so bad with that particular issue that now when I purchase something from Microsoft, we actually have a special card that we bought at Walmart, and it costs you $3 every time you put money on it. But you go put the amount of money on it that you're going to pay Microsoft so that they can never overcharge you again. Because if they try to overcharge me again, it only costs me $3 to replace that card. And they can't ever get into extra funds. And is that a reasonable result? No. But that's what I had to do. I still pay them that way anytime I'm paying them.
Okay, well, my pet peeve is Express Scripts, Gia. Have you ever had to deal with those people?
No, who's that?
Oh, I'll tell you. I don't know about some of these companies in America. I have complained to the Food and Drug Administration. I've complained to the Oregon Association for Prescription Pharmacies. I have complained to a corporation who's heard it from everybody that's employed there. They only have 10,000 employees. Anyways, there's this company. It's called Express Scripts. It's a mail-order prescription pharmacy. And you can only deal with them certain ways. Number one, you have to have a credit card so that they can immediately charge your account if somebody's ordered a prescription. Now, if you order a prescription and there's something wrong, like the doctor didn't sign it or something like that, they don't bother telling you. Your prescription's just held up and you're wondering where the heck it is until you finally call them and they say, oh, well, the doctor didn't sign the prescription, and they're working on getting the thing. The other day, it was they charged my checking account an incredible amount of money for these prescriptions that, well, nobody authorized. It's just like, I'm going, oh, my gosh, these people are just nuts, absolutely nuts. I mean, we've had to deal with them for 9 years. Now, we have a local pharmacy here, right? You need anything, they're just on top of everything right away. You've forgotten, ran out of pills, they call the doctor. Do you think the Express Scripts clear across the country does something like that? No. So we've complained to them quite a bit, and it's just, I think the thing that really irritates me is because they're saving major corporations money, you are forced to deal with them. There is no choice. That's the other thing I see happening is the lack of choices. And I don't like it. I don't like that sort of feeling like you're under the big corporate club and you don't have a choice. You have to participate. So luckily we have two insurances, so I don't have to deal with them personally as much because my own insurance covers my prescriptions. But for my husband and my kids, he's the primary, so they have to deal with them. It's terrible. So even our doctors hate them. We have one that outright refuses to fax prescriptions to them or deal with them because they said they screw things up all the time, and they're just not comfortable with that. Well, then what do? You go to your doctor, and they won't, they don't want to help you with your prescription because they don't like the company you're forced to deal with. There's a lot of these little things like this going on in this country, and I don't think people realize it. And I think what happens is that you have to get a point, like over in Egypt, you have to get to a point of zero tolerance. I'm not tolerating this anymore by a large number of people before there's any kind of real change made. Before, it's if 10% people didn't like it, then they do something to change it. Now it's got to be 90% of the population that doesn't like it before they do something to change something. It's just crazy. What the heck is a STIG?
I have no idea. Well, mail order prescriptions, I've not heard anyone have anything nice to say about any of these companies. In addition, a lot of times these are controlled substances, on their schedule, whatever, okay? They're dropped off in a rural mailbox, which may not even be within a mile of the house. There's no lock on it. Okay? There's a security issue from a lot of people, and they're forced to use them by their insurance company. If this is a regular prescription, you have to do it this way, or you have to pay a financial penalty because you don't like mail order prescriptions. And you get 90 days supply at one time, and for a lot of people, this may be a regular prescription, but after trying it for 90 days, their physician may decide that this drug is not working, and we're going to change your drug. Well, they just bought their 90-day supply, and now they're not going to be taking it.
Oh, that's the other thing I hate. We do have a family member that's constantly changing prescriptions, and you have to get this 90 days. What a waste of money for them and us. I mean, it's just like, it is. It's just crazy. It's wild. And I do live on the rural road. At one time, I had a family member that had a prescription that was a controlled substance. So they won't send a controlled substance in through the mail. You have to get it through UPS. Well, UPS won't deliver where I live, so I have to go chase them down in town and make appointments at whatever drop they might be at just to get the stupid prescription. I mean, it's just stupid. The whole thing is, and here you have a local pharmacy in your community that you could just drive over to and be able to take care of all of that stuff. I mean, everything here, what's a controlled substance? Well, anything that has...
Controlled substance usually contains an opiate or a synthetic opiate of some sort.
Exactly.
It's along those lines. Yeah. It's something that can be used for recreational abuse, I guess you might say. That's a kind of strange phrase, isn't it? Recreational abuse. Yeah. But anyhow, the whole mail order drugs is it's a bizarre world.
I think the thing that concerns me the most, Gia, is knowing what we've had to deal with, and we've been doing this for like 9 years. I think about elderly people that are forced into this mail order thing, and it gets really confusing. They want you to order online. They want you... a lot of those people, they don't have access. They don't get it. They don't understand. Trying to get a live body on the phone is just a trick and a half. And, I mean, are there people actually dying because they're not getting their prescriptions? I mean, we've wondered that. And it's just like crazy.
Well, even when you're dealing with, I had experience in observing people dealing with Indian Health Services, okay? And they weren't always fluent in English. So having a doctor talking to them, telling them about an experimental drug they were going to use on them to see if it would work, the person receiving the explanation had no clue what they were being told. They had no clue about these risks that they were being told about. All they understood was that this medicine was supposed to help them. I'm not even sure the directions were completely clear on how to take the medicine. And Indian Health Services for a while was one of my biggest complaints. Hopefully they've improved since the last time I observed anything to do with them. But it was so awful. I'm watching this and I'm going, we've made comments about the things that Nazis did in Germany to various people. And yet I know that in the United States, in the 1960s, a Native American girl was taken from her family sent to a sanitarium in, I believe it was Oklahoma, where as an experimental form of treatment for tuberculosis, they removed a lung on I think she was like 6 or 7 years old, 6-year-old child. Removed a lung in the 1960s. Eventually, she was allowed to return home to her family after a number of years. This removal of a lung at a young age left her, obviously stunted and prone to all sorts of health issues. Was that a reasonable treatment? Probably not. It would never have happened in a private hospital. Things like it was the 1960s before the system of kidnapping children from their families was stopped in regards to Native Americans. They used to pay a bounty on these kids. It wasn't even their parents that brought them to the boarding schools. Anybody could bring them and get the bounty. Anybody. These kids arrived from wherever, whatever reservation they were taken from, thrust into a school where they spoke a language that they did not speak. They were not allowed to speak their native language. They were forced to convert to Christianity, forced to speak English, and forced to have their hair cut. Okay. Now, I find that just absolutely horrific. The parents could not retrieve them. These kids could not leave and go home, because I know some adults talk about when they ran away from boarding school, and some of them made it all the way home before somebody showed up to pick them up and take them back. Some of these kids crossed 60 and 100 miles of very forbidding landscape to return home.
I remember reading about it.
And I find, everybody, okay, don't get me wrong, I don't think America's a bad place. Of all the places on earth, this is the only one I want to live in. But I want it to be the best it can possibly be. And by sweeping our dirty secrets under the rug, that they're not going to go away, the whole thing. I think about it. If somebody had come to me and told me my kids had to go to boarding school, I'd put a boot up their butt. People talk about public schools are full of drugs and booze. Yeah, the real world is full of drugs and booze too, okay? The public schools are just simply a small slice of society. Not necessarily our best slice, by the way. I've seen a lot of material posted on YouTube by teenagers complaining of their schools becoming essentially a fascist state on their own. I don't remember us being that way necessarily, but I can remember making fun. The school, I went to a public high school, and I can remember making fun of 6-inch rule, because that's what we called it, was a 6-inch rule. You could not be within 6 inches of a person of the opposite sex without getting suspended. The whole thing was that you could grope and kiss and everything on a person of the same sex. That was okay, but you were going to get suspended for getting too close to someone of the opposite sex. And they were serious about it. I know a lot of the kids in the school while I was going, there was a regular suspension routine. The first time your parents had to bring you back, you come back the next day. The second time it was 3 days. Third time, the penalty kept increasing. A lot of people were shocked to hear that in the 1970s that we had public schools with rules that strict. But we did. I don't know what kind
and
of
that's the way it should be. I'm sorry, but I really do believe that. When I went to school, I wasn't scared of, the principal. I was scared of my parents. If I did something and I got in trouble at school, forget what the school was going to do. I had to worry about what my parents were going to do. Nowadays, they don't care. Suspension, vacation, I get to go home, play video games, no big deal. So there really is kind of this, I don't know. It's another problem. Society's full of problems, and, each generation kind of has its thing. My parents' generation would have been the hippies, with those types of things. and they were a problem type of thing. And then, you know, the 80s was, you know, the drug generation, and, you know, now we got the who cares generation. And, you know, when my granddaughter goes to school, who's only, you know, she'll be 4 here next week, what is it going to be like then? I mean, I have a unique positioning of looking at it because I'm actually in one every day. And so I can see the actual changes that have taken place through the ages.
You know, and my daughter, I removed her from public school and began homeschooling her. I think she was in 8th grade. And I had some serious concerns about it. For one thing, she was not going to be able, we were homeschooling in Arizona, she was not going to be able to get a normal high school diploma. In addition, I was concerned she was going to miss out on all the fun stuff. You know, your senior prom and having a senior class and all the fun things that I did as a teenager, playing sports and the clubs and everything. Now, she doesn't think she missed out on anything. But the whole thing is that I took her out of public school because she had been placed as a special ed student because of some learning disabilities she had. Well, as a result of this special education designation, she had been allowed to buffalo her teachers. That's essentially what it was. She buffaloed them. They had been reading her tests all through elementary school. So when she's in junior high and we go into a restaurant and I hand her a menu to read and there's no pictures and she can't figure out what it says, we come from a reading family. Having a child that is 13 years old and cannot read is horrifying. I mean, absolutely horrifying. She couldn't read as well at 13 as she could at 5. And, you know, I really was. I was absolutely, totally horrified. So I began exploring the option of homeschooling her because I'm like, okay, we got to have a crash course. She can't do anything if she can't read. Nothing. There is not a thing in the world a kid who cannot read is capable of doing on their own. And being, you know, functionally illiterate versus completely illiterate isn't going to help her much. She's got to be able to read and comprehend signs, prices, labels, write a phone message that makes sense, and so forth and so on. Now, I have to say, she did learn to read. She can now read for pleasure. She writes blog entries for me. She's helped write website. I have no complaints whatsoever about her reading ability. However, she was not very happy with me the year she was 14. She learned to read. Did I really need to add that to my list of battles to do with a teenage daughter? Nope, not at all. But it was something that had to happen in my case. Was it the school's fault? Probably not. I probably should have been aware that she had an issue before that. But I missed it. Yeah, I absolutely missed it. So taking her out of public school, she now says it was probably the best thing I could have done for her. And, you know, it created some peculiarities in her education. She has some areas that she knows a lot about, other areas she doesn't know so much about. But as an adult, she can educate herself on the missing areas. I think all of us come through public school with a sort of dotted ability to comprehend various topics. I know I did, anyhow.
Well, I think anymore, Gia, with education is there are so many things to learn. I mean, you can only cram so much into a head in a certain period of time during a day and a certain number of months during a year. So
exactly.
So sometimes when I'm working with young people, it's like, okay, you know, why do I have to know this? Well, okay, because I'm not going to remember it. Well, maybe you're not going to remember it exactly, but the root's been created. So let's say 10 years from now, you're talking to somebody who happens to live in Uzbekistan, and you want to know kind of where that is. All right, you might not remember exactly where it is, but you might remember, you know, it's kind of over sort of by Russia. Be able to get out a map and find it fairly quickly. Whereas had you never been introduced to any geography, you got that globe spinning around like crazy trying to locate these places. I think, too, a lot of young people don't realize that the things they are learning today, they will use in the future. You know, they may not see the value of it at the time, but it will happen. at some point
well,
in time.
Even those of us who went through public high school and have reasonably good grades, and, no major issues and so forth and so on. I can remember, I'm 14 years old, I'm taking algebra, I'm really having a hard time with it. I hate this subject. And I'm not getting this. And I go to the teacher and I ask him, because I'm so frustrated with it. I'm like, why am I spending, because I was spending way more time on algebra, the subject I hated, versus the subjects I liked, like science and English. And I'm like, why do I have to learn this? What am I going to use it for? He must have been tired of looking at me. So, if you're a teacher, remember that what you say can create a profound, life-changing result in the child. But I say to him, what is algebra used for? He tells me to graduate from high school. Well, okay, I'm a 14-year-old girl. How much importance am I going to place on that? T makes me graduate from high school. That's all I need. That's all I got, too. Well, no. I soon learned that T meant that I couldn't take geometry and I couldn't take this science class or that science class, too. And it was going to affect me in college because I had no grasp of that algebra that I'd taken for that year either, because I really didn't learn anything at all. And now I know, as an adult, we use algebra for everything under the sun. Algebra is one of those subjects that you use for everything from calculating how much carpet you're going to need to redo your living room to how much grass seed you need to de-seed your front yard. We use it a lot. We use it way more than what I had any clue about. Nobody obviously pointed out the fact that I used algebra, the same equations I could never get the right answer for in algebra class. When you put me in science class and I needed to know what X was, and I knew that A and B was really length and width, then I could figure out what X was because I cared. I cared about the results. I could get the same equation right. Nobody pointed that out to me either. So, algebra is something that, yes, it's very important. You need to use it. You need to understand the basic concepts. You need to be able to figure it out. But as far as the importance that I placed on it at 14, oh, no, it was not very important. I was so tired of fighting those equations and not being able, because I didn't care what X was. I didn't care. I didn't know what A and B were, so why would I care what X was?
Actually, Ju, that's a really good point. There's a lot of young people that can do the algebraic equations as related to science than standalone in math. And the reason why is because there is a visual learner. There's 4 concrete learning styles, and being a visual learner is one of them. When I took algebra, I was in the 8th grade. I was put, and it was algebra. It wasn't no pre-algebra or anything like that. So I'm sitting there, I'm staring at the problems on the board. I asked the teacher, well, what do we use this for? And because I don't understand it, I can't figure it out. He says, just look at the board. It didn't do anything for me. All that was there was a math problem. Now, if he would have drew the picture that went with the math problem, I wouldn't have had any problem. Later in life, I did algebra, and it was easy because I had somebody that gave me the visual for it, or I could do it in conjunction with science, and science provides the visual. And so, sometimes we expect these people just to be able to, sit and look at these numbers and stuff, and we don't realize that if they don't have the picture to go along with it, they are not going to get it. You give them that picture, and it's not a problem.
Yeah, I find it hilarious. I am very much a visual learner, okay? If I don't see it, I will never remember it. Lectures were an exercise in agony. I actually graduated from high school thinking that there was something wrong with me because I could not pay attention during a lecture. My mind would wander. Before long, I was gone on some idea that had nothing to do with the guy standing up at the front of the room going, wah, 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 for an hour. I had no clue what he talked about. I just could not pay attention. I thought there was something wrong with me. So, in college, I developed mechanisms to help me compensate for what I thought was an inability to pay attention. And, in the 70s, it wasn't a big deal to diagnose everybody with ADD. I was actually diagnosed in my 30s when my kids were. But the whole thing was is I couldn't pay attention to a lecture if my life depended on it. So as an adult in college, I learned pick instructors with annoying vocal habits of some kind, or take copious notes so that I can see material. I didn't yet understand that I was a visual learner, but I knew that if I wrote it down and saw it, I could remember it. So I took notes that would do any teacher proud. I mean, everything they said was written down so that I could find it again. And they were very, very complete notes about what was said in the lecture. And it kept me busy because I had to pay attention to essentially transcribe their lecture to a written form. So that was how I coped with it when I was older. Now I know the reason that I had to do that is I have to see things so that I could remember them, learn them. If I don't see it, I have no clue. You can tell me about it till you're blue in the face. I need to see it and do it. My daughter, on the other hand, seeing it means nothing to her. She needs to hear it. And, you know, I learned to translate for her, you know, right from riding lessons, okay? We lived in an area where everybody rode Western. But, of course, my daughter wants to learn the riding license. So I find a guy to give her lessons, get her the appropriate saddle and so forth and so on, and he's trying to give her lessons, and she's looking at him like he's speaking Greek. Well, I'm thinking, I don't understand what he's saying either, so I can't expect this 7-year-old to understand it. So I figured out, he was trying to teach her to post is what he was trying to do. So I figured out how to do it. And the end result was that then I went and told her how to do it because she needed to hear it in a certain way. And so she now is under the impression that only I can translate things for her. Yeah, I guess I needed to keep my superpowers as a mom somehow, right? Are you still there, November?
Yes, and you did go with your superpowers of the mom. I was thinking about what 2 squared was, and for some reason the first thing that came to mind is chocolate.
You know what has happened?
See, I'm the ADHD. I can drift all over the place. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's that associative thinking that gets you every time, you know, which is actually a very creative process. Folks, we have wandered all over the topics, all over the place, but we have run out of time once again. I would like to thank November for joining us tonight and being guest. You've been great, November. Even if it has been an ADHD night or ADD night or whatever night. Folks, I've enjoyed the program with November, and I hope all of you have as well, and that you found it provided you with plenty of food for thought and more illumination for your personal journey towards truth. Join us again next week for another episode of The Dawn of Shades, which is sure to be another fascinating conversation with our guest. With that, we are out of time. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and good night.